So what kind of cells do we find in the lymphatic system? Keep in mind that these cells are not exclusive to the lymphatic system. They will be found other places in the body. So starting with lymphocytes. We already knew lymphocytes were in the lymphatic system. Lymphocytes, lymphatic, right? There's three types of lymphocytes: T cells, B cells, and natural killer cells. T cells and B cells are important for the specific immune response, which we'll talk about in a different video. And then natural killer cells, or NK cells, which are capable of detecting self cells that have gone rogue, like virally infected cells or parasitically infected cells or cancer cells. Other types of cells that we find in the lymphatic system include macrophages and dendritic cells. Macrophages and dendritic cells are very similar. They're both phagocytic cells that are capable of eating things like bacteria and debris, and they can also help start the specific immune response. As we'll find out later, in order to start a specific immune response, we need a cell like a macrophage or a dendritic cell or an infected cell to kind of get the ball rolling. We've already talked about some lymphatic organs: lymph nodes, lymph vessels, cisterna chyli as examples, but there's a few other lymphatic organs we need to discuss. We separate lymphatic organs into two categories: primary and secondary. The primary lymphatic organs are involved with the development and production of lymphocytes. The bones with red bone marrow are considered primary lymphatic organs, and the thymus is too, and those are the only two primary lymphatic organs. Red bone marrow is where all blood cells are born, including our lymphocytes. The B lymphocytes will stay in the bone marrow, hence B, for their development. The T cells are born in the bone marrow, but they go to the thymus, T, for development. The thymus is a gland that sits right on top of the heart, and its only job is to train T cells. And it atrophies as we age because as we get older, we are bumping into less new pathogens, so we don't need as much of our specific immune response. Though with COVID-19, probably a nice functioning thymus would have been handy. Secondary lymphatic organs are considered secondary because they're not involved with the production and development of lymphocytes, but they have a lot of lymphocytes inside of them. Lymph nodes we already talked about. Tonsils I'm going to spend some time on. Spleen we learned about in our blood section. So the spleen is considered the red blood cell graveyard of the body, but there is a lot of lymphocytes inside of the spleen because that slow flow of blood through the spleen is very similar to the slow flow of lymph through a lymph node, and it allows the lymphocytes to survey the area for any pathogens. Tonsils I'll talk more about in a second. Some other lymphatic organs that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but I just wanted to mention. There's something called MALT, and I hate it because it sounds like a food, but it's basically like a patch of lymphatic tissue, or I shouldn't say a patch. They are patches of lymphatic tissues that are found in our mucous membranes of the respiratory tract, digestive tract, reproductive tract, urinary tract. All of those are systems that have access to the outside environment, right? So outside environment means potential pathogens. So these patches of MALT tissue are there to detect pathogens and start a specific immune response if necessary. We also have lymphatic nodules, which are kind of similar to the MALT tissue itself. But let's talk about tonsils. Tonsils are lymphatic organs that are located in or near the pharynx, which is the fancy name for the throat. And tonsils are helping to protect us against pathogens that we inhale or ingest with our food. And there's a lot of pathogens coming in both ways. There are three types of tonsils found in humans. One pharyngeal tonsil, which is often referred to as the adenoid. And as you can see in the picture here, it's located in the upper portion of the pharynx called the nasopharynx. We have two palatine tonsils, And these are the ones that you can see orally. So we can see these through an oral exam. The adenoid cannot be seen through an oral exam. And then there are several lingual tonsils, lingual as in language, as in tongue, and these are found deep to the tongue. So tonsillitis is inflammation of the tonsils, and this is very common when we have some sort of pathogen that's been inhaled or ingested, and our tonsils get swollen because they're doing their job of fighting off that infection, right? They're swollen because there's a lot of lymphocytes being reproduced, there's a lot of pathogens in there, and a lot of debris, just like with lymphadenitis. However, in some cases, some people suffer from excessive tonsillitis. And this can be problematic because it can actually stop us from breathing. And this is called obstructive sleep apnea. So the tonsils obstruct the airflow through the pharynx, and apnea means to stop breathing, and it can stop people from breathing. In this circumstance, usually a tonsillectomy is performed. In a tonsillectomy, the adenoid is usually removed along with some or part, that's the same thing, some or all of the palatine tonsils. My daughter had a tonsillectomy when she was kindergarten age. She did have tonsillitis. Her tonsils were so big, they were touching, and she didn't really have sleep apnea. Her problem was swallowing food. So she was really, really, really thin. And one of the reasons why was because it was so uncomfortable for her to eat. So, and she did snore like hell, so she probably did have sleep apnea. We never had her tested for it, but we had the tonsillectomy done anyway because of the obstruction with her eating. So after her tonsillectomy, she started gaining weight, so she could eat again, and she didn't have any problems with snoring. But very interesting is the fact that she never had a single ear infection prior to her tonsillectomy. After her tonsillectomy, she started getting ear infections, and she started getting constant strep throat. So this goes to show you that those tonsils are there for a reason, right? They were preventing her from getting strep throat and preventing her from getting ear infections. So in some ways I feel like a horrible mom because my daughter got sick after her tonsillectomy a lot, but at the same point she couldn't eat, so I guess it was the lesser of two evils. So just to kind of show you some interesting things with tonsils, despite the fact of how gross looking this is, these are actually normal tonsils. Tonsils often have these little crater things called crips on them. And if you're wondering, the structure here is called the uvula. We talk about that when we get to the digestive system. This is classic strep throat. So the white patches on the swollen tonsils are indicative of a streptococcus bacteria that is infecting the pharynx.